So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us in the cozy end of the conference hall. My name is Richard Barkey. I'm the founder and chief executive of a company called Imparta. I'll introduce us briefly in a second. As this is a learning technology expo, most of you, I suspect, will have come across the term Agile in the context of software development. What I'm going to talk about today is how you can apply those concepts of Agile development to both selling and sales training and sales management. So I guess the people here are the subset of learning technologists who also care about sales. So welcome to that very select group. As I say, Imparta is a company, we're global. We operate in three main content areas: sales, service and contact centers, and sales through service, which is predominantly in the retail and hospitality space. And in the sales arena, we're in everything from aero engines to light bulbs. We also train in leadership and marketing as supporting elements of the offer, if you like. And at the heart of what we do is this thing called the capability building system, which is designed to power learning. As we all know, training on its own doesn't stick. So the capability building system is a lean change process wrapper designed to help training to have sustainable impact. So that's Imparta. Now, when we're brought into client situations, quite often the image that springs to my mind when I look at what they've been doing up to now is this. And I don't know if any of you are keen hikers and might know what that is, but that is an ancient sheep dip. And those of you who've been in learning for a while will know that sometimes sheep dipping your people is the right thing to do. You need to get everybody up to a baseline standard of competence or capability, and putting everybody through a single training program can be the right way to start. But what it doesn't do is take into account the fact that each sheep actually is different and has its own personality and might need different skills. And it doesn't adapt very well to changing environments. And it's not just training where our approaches are sometimes less than agile. Also, when people are selling, the way a lot of companies think about their sales process, if I may extend the hiking analogy slightly, is kind of like stepping stones across a river. It's a very rigid set of steps from A to B. And there are a few problems with this as a sales approach. One is you can't really deviate without getting into trouble. And the second is the steps kind of go against the direction that the client is trying to move in, i.e. the river. And selling needs to take account of where the customer is in their journey, not just where you are in your sales process. So in both of those approaches, the old style linear, what one might call a waterfall approach to selling and sales training actually doesn't work very well. Luckily, there is an alternative, which is Agile. In normal English, Agile means the ability to move quickly and easily. And as you probably know, in software development, it relates to or denotes an approach to project management that's characterized by dividing tasks into short phases and frequent reassessment and adaptation of plans. So Agile, as it applies in the world of sales training, is a really interesting concept, but it's taken over the world of software development. So over 90%, it's estimated, of software development programs now use a form of Agile development. And there's a company called the Standish Group who do an annual survey called the Chaos Survey, and they found that in very rough terms, if you use an Agile approach instead of the old style waterfall approach to software development, which is great big long linear projects with a planning phase, a coding phase, and then a testing phase, the Agile approach means that you're roughly twice as likely to succeed and half as likely to fail badly as with the old waterfall approach. Now, obviously, you can run into problems with either approach. It's not a panacea, but it can significantly improve your chances of success. And the same is true in the sales environment as well. So when I think about applying Agile to sales, there are three ways that we can do that. The first is an Agile sales methodology. The second is Agile Sales Management, and the third is Agile Sales Training or Sales Learning. And we'll spend a little time just looking at each of those in turn. But first, let me just, for those of you not too familiar with Agile, just talk about what Agile actually is. So in 2001, a bunch of people who described themselves as software development anarchists got together in a ski resort in Utah and pulled together what they called the Agile Manifesto. They were looking at ways to not get rid of process, but to fix an old process that was pretty broken in terms of the way we were doing software development. And they had 4 key values that they came up with. One is they valued individuals and interactions over processes and tools. It doesn't mean that processes and tools are not important, but they would, if there was a choice, pick individuals first. Secondly, they value working software over comprehensive documentation. So at the end of each stage of a development process, you have something that is a functional piece of software. And I've added a couple of words to this manifesto. So that for me is about quality output. They value collaboration with the customer over negotiating contracts. And finally, they valued responding to change over following a plan. And this is where I've added in, iterative, adaptive, incremental approach to selling and software design. So that's the Agile Manifesto. But Agile itself is an umbrella term that covers a whole range of different approaches to software dev, from feature-driven development to rapid application development, and over in the left there to Scrum. On the left is generally the lighter weight approaches, and on the right are the fuller approaches to Agile development. But of all of these, Scrum is probably the one that has become the dominant approach to Agile development. So what is Scrum? You may know this already, but just to provide a quick update for people who don't. So the Scrum process begins with what's called a product backlog, the features that we want to add into a product. Those features are then prioritized in terms of impact they'll have and the time they'll take to create. And they are fed into what's called a sprint backlog. And a sprint is a 2 to 4 week exercise that involves development and testing, and at the end leads to a working product increment, so an additional part of the product that is functional software. Now, that 2 to 4 week period is really critical because it means that within that time, things haven't changed too much within a sprint, although they change quite a bit from sprint to sprint. And there's another cycle that happens within a sprint, which is called the daily Scrum. And there's a daily stand-up meeting at the beginning of each day where people talk about what they did yesterday, what they're going to do today, and what obstacles they're facing. So Scrum is designed to get you to an output by focusing on collaboration and people working together, by technical excellence and testing for quality within the Scrum, and by prioritizing the objectives in a way that can change quickly if the environment changes. At the end of all of that is a sprint retrospective or a sprint review that's used to feedback and say, what did we do, what worked, what could we do differently and better next time? So that's a Scrum. Let's think about selling now. So in a sales process, is there applicability of that kind of approach? When we talk about selling, most modern sales methodologies focus not on a sales process, but on the buying process that a customer goes through, starting with, at the top there, becoming aware of their needs, moving on to assessing the alternative solutions for those needs, alleviating the risk associated with that solution, making a decision and negotiating terms, and finally implementing and achieving the results that they set out to achieve. Now the problem with that is that people go through that cycle pretty quickly, and individuals within the organization might be going through it at different speeds and at different times, and sometimes they might fall off the process altogether. So as a salesperson, it's critical to recognize that I need to map my skills and my activities onto the journey that the customer is going through and not onto a sales process. So I have to be agile and customer focused in the way I think about that. But also, that process is not really a linear process. So quite often, people coming to your company looking for support may come in at the assessment of alternatives phase, so kind of halfway through the cycle, having done a lot of reading online, investigation on the internet, and they may have actually come up with the wrong picture of what it is they're trying to do and how you might be able to help. So quite often we have to be agile enough to take them back to the beginning of the learning journey and to reframe their needs in a way that we can help them to understand is more appropriate. So we have to be non-linear, which is another feature of Agile. Thirdly, there's a lot of talk in the sales community today about insight-based sales. And the idea is you create an insight working with your marketing team and you take it out to the customer and you go, hey, I've got something about your business that you didn't know before. And the problem is that insight is in the eye of the beholder. So an insight has to be tailored to the company you're talking to. One insight will not fit all. So I have to adapt to the environment in which I find myself selling. Fourth, a good proposal, a good sales proposal is iterative. You don't just create a massive proposal and then go, chunk, here you are. The best proposals are created with the customer. They're co-created. So that iterative nature is also a key Agile aspect, as you'll probably recognize. Success depends on responding to change as well. So down here in the cycle, you quite often are nearly at the deal, and then a whole bunch of new stakeholders get introduced, and suddenly it's like you've got to explain yourself all over again, and you need to figure out what's changed, who are these people, and why have they been introduced to the process? What risk are they representing? So good salespeople need to respond to change quickly, and above all, collaborate with the customer through the whole process. That's what wins deals. So it is very much an Agile process in dealing with the customer's buying cycle. And the things that you need to be able to do at different stages, so in the awareness of needs, you need to be able to identify opportunities, build momentum in the sale, prove value. Here I need to be able to identify the decision criteria that a client's going to use to choose between me and the other options out there, create a pitch strategy, manage stakeholders and so on. Down here I have to identify and alleviate risk. Here I have to negotiate value, and up there I have to become a trusted advisor. So if I'm trying to use the skills that I need in one part of the cycle, when the customer is actually somewhere else in the cycle, I'm going to come a cropper, and it's not going to help me build momentum around that journey. So in addition to the 4 values, the Agile Manifesto has in it 12 principles for Agile software development. And what we've done is slightly cheekily adapted those principles for selling. And inside the pack on your chair is a little Agile Manifesto for sales that's been adapted for the sales environment. Have a look, take it away, show it to your head of sales, or if you are the head of sales, I'd be interested to hear your thought on whether that resonates with you. So that's selling. Let's turn quickly to sales management. And I'm going to make a case for Agile sales management that goes like this. In the role of a sales manager, you help people to plan their approach to an account or to an opportunity. You then allow them to kind of implement that plan, and then you have to review it on a regular basis. And the failure points in this are threefold. So the first one is that managers often focus on achieving quota instead of on what are the short cycle activities and wins that I as a salesperson have to do in order to progress clients around that buying journey. So a manager who focuses on a quota is a bit like somebody managing a team at the World Cup standing on the sideline and yelling score. It's correct, but it's not necessarily very helpful. You've got to focus on what they're actually doing in order to make progress. Secondly, we find that self-governing account teams and pitch teams actually make better decisions and make more progress. So you find good people, you motivate them, you support them, and then you trust them to get on with it. But at the same time, you have to review and help those teams to flex frequently as the sale evolves and as new information comes to light. So for all those reasons, an agile approach to sales management is as important as it is to selling itself. Here's our Scrum process, and with the magic of PowerPoint, we can now change that into a sales Scrum, where instead of product backlog, we have pipeline goals. So what are we trying to do with opportunities in the pipeline overall? They become the goals for the sprint, and then we go through a sprint process of 2 to 4 weeks with daily stand-ups, and at the end of it, what we're seeing is not approved product increments, but progress in the buying process for those clients. So the Scrum approach does actually work pretty well for the sales environment. And if I think about the team that you need to make that work, in normal Scrums you have a Scrum Master who is in effect the sales manager, the coordinator of the sales Scrum. You have the team members that would be the salespeople, support people, but also external departments like marketing and finance even, and ultimately the product owner. Most agile implementations fail because there isn't enough representation from the product owner or the customer in the Scrum itself. And in this case, the product owner is really the customer or somebody representing the voice of the customer. So making sure that in that Scrum team you have that customer voice is key to success. And metrics are critical too. So this is a typical pipeline where you're looking to manage metrics around the size of the pipeline, its shape between different probability stages, how we're doing on the must-win deals, where the leakage is in the pipeline, how quickly deals are moving through the pipeline, and what the product mix is that we're seeing. And all of that data from your LMS, from the CRM system, gets fed back into the front of the Scrum process. I wish I had more time to talk about this. It's kind of a cool topic, but moving swiftly on then to Agile sales training. And again, I'm going to make the case for change here. So if you look at the competencies of one of your salespeople, or if you don't like the word competencies, skills is the same thing really. We tend to look at it on a radar plot. So you've got all of the competencies of an opportunity manager listed there. And the red is the team average. The blue is the individual's perception of their own skill level. And the green is a more objective measure of their skill, probably their manager's assessment. Now, there's an issue with this, which is that every salesperson is different. So you might want to sheep dip them to begin with, but then they need precision development in order to fill in the gaps that they have. So there's no point somebody who's good enough at presentations going on a presentation course. They want to go on a managing stakeholders course if that's their weakness. So that's the first issue with non-agile approaches to sales training. And the second is that your needs as an organization change pretty quickly. Not just as markets evolve over years, but there might be a new product launch, there might be a new competitor entry into your marketplace. So you might have to adapt this, in the course of weeks or months, not years. So being agile is critical not just in sales management, but also in sales training. So just as we had the sales management Scrum, there's a sales training Scrum as well. So data from coaching, from the CRM, from your learning management system, all feeding into a skill backlog, and then the creation of sprint goals, learning sprints, and at the end of it is a set of improved skills coming out that you then feed back in and kick the process off again. So that same Scrum methodology works in sales management, and in sales learning. In Agile, one of the core concepts is that of user stories. So you think about the stories about how people are going to use your product. And I think in learning, it's useful to think about user stories as well. And for me, there are 4 main user stories or use cases where people are using learning. And I'm talking about sales here, but this could apply to any discipline, really. So the first is as a course. And that's how most of the stuff in here will be used. You go in, you do a course, and you've completed it. Again, slightly sheep-dippy, but can be good. The second use case is competency-based, where if I go back to the radar plot of skills, I can identify where my weaknesses are and drill down and do just the training I need in order to improve those areas. The third use case is context-based, so this is performance support in the context of doing the job. I'm trying to win a deal, I'm trying to grow an account, and this is contextualized help in doing that job. And finally, campaign is where the company is trying to create a major shift in the dial on, let's say, win rate or account size, or where there's a market change or a new product introduction. So all of these can feed into versions of the same content, but they're very, very different use cases for people going through the learning. And if you can, whether it's classroom-based training or using technology, adapt to those use cases, you will allow people to change what they're doing in the sprint depending on what they actually need at that moment. That gets more complicated still when you think about different roles and even different geographical markets with different needs in the marketplace. So for me, good agile learning should be, as a sprint is, you learn by doing and you feed it back. Good agile learning is also experiential. We do this using simulations in flat screen or even in virtual reality now, where you're basically practicing the skills that you're using in a sale, and then you're feeding that back, you're getting feedback, getting the theory to help you do better, trying again, and then applying it in the field. If you want to have a look at that, our stand's just here. But experiential learning, whether it's in the classroom or enabled by technology, is definitely an agile approach to learning. And it needs to be bite-sized, so if you're going to have something that adapts to the different needs and competencies of the team, then having a range of modular content that people can dive into is also very helpful. It needs to have data that you can use to empower managers to be the Scrum Master and know where you need to focus the energy. And it doesn't need to, or it shouldn't, ignore face-to-face communication. I'll just explain this very quickly. So in martial arts, there are two types of practice. There's kata, and a kata is where you do a sequence of moves of punches, kicks, blocks, and so on. But it's kind of done on your own in a very stylized way. Bunkai is not exactly a fight, but it's sparring in a controlled way based on those moves. And so we use those terminologies within training as well. So kata is, doing some e-learning on your own, and then the bunkai is when you get together with the manager or your colleagues and you're practicing the application of those skills in a controlled environment. So even with technology, we shouldn't miss out that critical face-to-face component, going back to the Agile Manifesto. And this can have a big impact. We replaced the onboarding for Cisco's global virtual sales organization with a virtual sales academy. It saved them about $1 million over the course of 3 years. Better consistency, more competitive advantage because they were agile. They could react quickly and get people up to speed more quickly. And especially for millennials and managers, there was a significant improvement in empowerment and buzz. So I've covered an awful lot of ground in a very short time. My apologies for that. But I think just to summarize, the reason Agile has conquered the world of software development is software development is complex, it's a non-linear process, it's non-deterministic, which means if you do the same thing, you might not get the same result each time. And so Agile is the way that software developers have used to deal with those characteristics. Selling and sales management and sales learning are equally complex, non-linear, and non-deterministic disciplines. And so in each of those three areas, I believe personally, and we're still probably early stages of our journey with this, but I believe that Agile has an awful lot to offer, both in terms of how we configure technology and how we run our day-to-day processes as people in the sales world. So I greatly appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. No questions. All right, have a great day, everybody. Thank you very, very much indeed. Thank you.